the second time, Formula E is in Jakarta in Indonesia, and we're all set for the second free practice session of the current fascinating championship battle. Welcome from me, Ben Edwards, in the commentary box, along with racer and motorsport aficionado Karun Chandhok, as one of the biggest cities in the world hosts rounds 10 and 11 of the 2023 ABB FIA Formula E World Championship. It is a spectacular place, the capital city of Indonesia, the largest of the nation, on the northwest coast of Java, and Java, the world's most populous island. Many people around. It is the economic, cultural and political centre of Indonesia, and there's going to be plenty of people beside the track, no doubt, absorbing some of the atmosphere of an event that is building up nicely in terms of the championship. Some great battles that we've seen already this year. The last event taking place in Monaco, and it meant that we now have a new championship leader in Nick Cassidy, because he has taken 2 wins in a row in the last 2 events, the second race in Berlin and then in Monaco last time out. That means that Nick Cassidy has now taken the championship lead from Pascal Wehrlein, who's also taken 2 victories in the 2023 calendar. So the calendar now sees 2 more races here in Jakarta, rounds 10 and 11, with round 12 in Portland, and then to Rome and London to complete that calendar. So much to look forward to. We've got new drivers taking part too. David Beckman's coming in for his first Formula E race, although he's been a sim driver for a while. Roberto Meri is also taking part this weekend for Mahindra. Then we've got the experienced championship contenders, Jake Dennis, big smile on his face as he's hoping to get back up to podium again, as he did in Monaco in fact. Pascal Wehrlein, a double winner, was the championship leader in the early part of the year, but Nick Cassidy is now the man leading the title battle. Can he maintain that? That's going to be a big question. Wonderful view over the track there as we look at the points in the championship. Nick Cassidy with a 20-point lead over Pascal Wehrlein. Jake Dennis in that 3rd place for Avalanche Andretti. Mitch Evans, though, the other New Zealander, and it's been New Zealand wins between Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy at the last 4 races. Mitch is very much a part of it too in 4th place. So is Jean-Eric Verne in 5th position. Reigning champion Stoffel van Dorn's had a more tough time. He's down in 11th place. Other champions like Lucas Di Grassi struggling a bit too, down in 15th place at the moment. So that is an overview of the track itself, but what we're looking at here is the championship positions for the teams. Envision with Nick Cassidy and Sebastian Buemi. They are leading the championship over Tag Heuer Porsche, Jaguar in 3rd place, and then Avalanche Andretti. So it's the 2 Jag power teams, the 2 Porsche power teams that are doing so well in the series right now. So here's a look at the track. Karun, talk us through what we can be getting ready for here.
18 corners take the drivers around this amazing circuit that's been created completely for the Formula E World Championship here. Start finish straight heads you down towards a tight right-hand corner. There will be a bit of a funneling effect when we get to the race. It winds itself around the monument as we get through this sort of section of the middle part of the track, but the drivers don't really get a chance to relax. They're constantly going from one corner into the other. The attack mode activation comes around the outside of turn 16, a left-hander, before you come around the final right corner, back up to the start-finish line.
So that's a look at the track, and they'll all be out on that in just a few moments' time. We are in Indonesia, and here we are. Track temperature 31 at the moment. That's not too high. Early hours in Indonesia. Air temperature 30 degrees, humidity at 66%. That will no doubt ramp up. This is one of the hottest, most humid events of the whole season, and that's something that drivers certainly have to get used to. Nick Cassidy, championship leader then, Karun, and he's been in a really good place all year long. He now has a different race engineer, so that's something that he's kind of got to work getting into a little bit. Second practice, it's a real opportunity to get to grips with your engineer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they would have had a bit of time to at least work together in the simulator, because, you know, that relationship between the driver and the race engineer is absolutely key. You know, I know we often talk about motor racing being a team sport and everybody's obviously got to do their part, but when it comes to affecting the end result, having a good working relationship with your engineer, between a driver and engineer, is one of the most pivotal parts of that entire team.
Lucas Di Grassi, we're just seeing, and Roberta Meri. Roberta Meri is just the first of the two Mahindra cars here, so they're going out together, and it is a debut in Formula E for Roberto Meri. And he's an experienced driver, though. I remember commentating on him when he raced in Formula 1. He didn't do a lot of Formula 1, and actually, when he got into Formula 1, it was quite early in his career in some ways. He was with the Marussia team in 2015. He did 13 Grand Prix for them. In recent years, he's been doing some more Formula 2, but now he's getting into Formula E. A lot to learn this weekend. Let's listen in.
And brake warm up, and warm your fronts. Keep looking after the rears, but warm your fronts.
Engineer talking to the other driver who's making his debut this weekend, David Beckman. And Karan, David's actually done a lot of sim work in Formula E, so he's got the experience in the sim, but now he's got to get that experience in the car.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Roger Griffiths said the team boss at Andretti had to make a decision because their regular driver, Andre Lautre, is off to Le Mans and for the big 24-hour race coming up. Max Günther. So Maserati had a good day yesterday, Ben, didn't they? 1-2 in the free practice session. They're coming off the back of a pretty dreadful race in Monte Carlo, where they had both cars in the top 7 on the grid. For their home race, it came away with no points. So they, it's sort of been the story of their season in so many ways. They've often been quick, but when you actually look at the championship table, neither driver is near the sharp end.
No, you're absolutely right. It's been a bit of a tough time, but Eder Mortara, they're a championship contender in recent years, and so, you know, there's got to be a chance, hopefully. James Rossiter, the racing team principal, keeping a close eye on things at the moment as the two cars are heading around together. Maybe, oh, and he actually hits the wall. He actually touches the wall with both right-hand wheels early on. You can see there's still a lot of dust around, isn't there?
It's very dusty, particularly offline, it seems. So he's coming straight back into the pits, and that's kind of been a running theme this season. As I said before, they've, you know, the drivers have ended up getting themselves into incidents on more than one occasion. There is Eder Mortara there. So he had a bit of locking on the rear end as he came into that left-hand braking zone there, turn 16. And you can see the rear of the car, he couldn't quite correct it in time. I think he might get away with it. It's rubbed off the logos. Yeah, look, the wheel rim is damaged. But I think because it was more of a glancing blow, he might get away with that.
Yeah, he may. And especially, as you say, it's sort of an even hit against the wall without too much angle. Hopefully it hasn't bent suspension.
Yeah, the only other thing to think about is they only get 2 sets of tyres for the day. Now, if he's damaged that tyre, that's gone from his allocation. And that's going to complicate life for the rest of today.
Experienced driver, Eder Mortara, but easy to make mistakes. And that actually is one of the first mistakes we've seen this weekend. It was remarkably calm in first free practice yesterday. Very few people had any problems at all. Mortara, as we mentioned, was actually second fastest to his teammate. Early stages right now of FP2, and the two DS Penskes are topping the times, but we'll see a lot of changes to those times as we go through the rest of the session. Now, Mitch Evans here, of course, one of the major contenders for the championship, and a multiple race winner, double race winner already this year, and a lot of people thinking, well, he's really on the case now. He's 4th in the points, but he's still close. And in fact, if he, for example, was to take pole position...
I made a mistake last corner. Copy. That was just over a 10th and a half, sector 1.
If he was to take pole position and get the 3 points you get for pole, it would actually put him up into 3rd place in the championship. Of course, it's the race that's more important with the big numbers of points involved there. Meanwhile, Nissan out on track as well. This is Norman Nato. They've had a mixed time. They've had some good qualifying sessions, not always getting the top race results that they want.
Yeah, they seem to have a good car over one lap. You know, they're able to unlock performance. If you look back to Monaco, you know, between the McLaren and the Nissan powertrains, they had a very, very strong qualifying, but they still collectively haven't got the efficiency, it seems, when it comes to the races. You know, they sort of drop back. As you said, you know, as a team, I think back to Fenestra's strong pole in Cape Town as well. And when you go even earlier, races like India, even though he was very competitive on the grid, but can't quite convert it when it matters in the race. This is Jean-Eric Verne slipping and sliding his way around as the dust starts to clear. So we're going to see a lot of evolution, Ben, throughout the session. You know, I think certainly the quickest times will come towards the end. And the drivers have just got to be mindful of that. You know, it's very easy when the track's so slippery to get caught out. And as we saw Mortara doing, they've got to make sure they've got, A, the car to be in the session towards the end, but B, you know, not get too spooked with the early conditions here and start changing the setup, because if you start doing that, then actually when the dust clears off, you might be in the wrong setup window.
Oh, it was a good lap by Verne. He has just set the fastest lap, not quite as quick as we saw in FP1 yesterday, but that has put him to the top with the fastest in Sector 1 and Sector 3 as well, the final sector. So Mortara actually having to get out of the car, and maybe there is work. Well, we saw the damage on the wheel. They clearly had to change wheels, but maybe there's a bit more analysis that has to be done and check up. So whether he's going to get back out in this session, we've still got a bit of time, over 20 minutes to go. Hopefully they will get him back out, because getting that running in, getting those extra laps in, so important before we get into group qualifying, where you're right on the keys straight away, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So it's never a good sign when the driver's helmet comes off, because that means it's going to be a few minutes before they get him back in at least. So Neo, they've got a very, I'm trying to choose the right word here, very energetic driver lineup when it comes to qualifying. These two drivers, both Sergio Settecamera we're watching here and Dan Ticktum, very exciting to watch when it comes to qualifying in particular. They do like throwing the car around, and you know, they've done some, you know, we talked about the Nissan drivers earlier, but these guys as well done some good qualifyings so far this season. Another team who haven't quite got the efficiency in the races, but the drivers are, you know, really throwing the car around, trying to extract the best they can. Settecamera a bit wide there. Interesting to see compared to Verne's line, wasn't it? You know, Jev used a tighter line there and sort of avoided the dust, which might be the smarter thing to do.
The track has been resurfaced, I gather, from last year, from when it was the first time that Formula E came here. You can see still some bumps. I know they'd got rid of, they got rid of some of the bumps. I think there were some key bumps around turn 7, 8, but you can see it is still a little bumpy in places, can't you?
Yeah, so, I mean, essentially what they've done here is you know, reclaim the land. All of this was a swamp, you know, which is what it's hard to believe when you look at the grandstands and all the stuff around. This was all swampland a few years ago, and they spent an awful lot of time and effort trying to reclaim all the land, get a solid base underneath, and then plonk the circuit on top, which is, you know, a massive commitment to an event like this.
It is, absolutely. That's a quick look into turn 1 and into the Neo 333 team here. Dan Ticktum, part of that team, as you mentioned. His best qualifying so far this year, or best grid position, has been 4th on the grid, and his best finish 6th. Whereas the man we were just watching, Sergio Settecamera, he has had a 5th place. That was in Hyderabad, but he's had 8 times failing to score any points in the races this year, so yeah, not all gone well. René Rast we're looking at now. So experienced driver once again, the German. He's 10th in the championship at the moment on 40 points. He's had 1 podium so far this year, best finished of 3rd place. There's the team principal, Ian James. This team that was set up for this year runs with the Nissan power. There we are, seeing more Nissan in the pits now as well. And yeah, it's been working pretty well. Again, as we said, in qualifying, doesn't always have quite the energy duration during the races that they would like, but that's something that all the teams are trying to improve. They haven't been allowed to do a lot of testing, but there's been a lot of software work still going on. So we've had a little gap since Monaco. We might see some changes coming up this weekend, but it is complicated by the additional heat as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the fact that we've got 2 races this weekend is going to be beneficial for the teams who haven't had a chance to do much testing in between the last race and this one, because they learned some lessons. As we see Nick Cassidy testing the attack mode around the outside. That's important to do for 2 reasons. One, for the driver to understand what the grip is like around that wide part of the circuit, which they don't traditionally use. And secondly, for the team to understand how much time is lost by using that wider line.
Wonderful onboard view from underneath Nick Cassidy's car. This is a camera position we're enjoying in Formula E this year. And You can sort of see from a very different perspective. The surface gives us an idea of how bumpy it is. It's not looking overly bumpy. Obviously, there is a bit of movement going on, and we'll just have to see how it goes.
Still under-consuming.
Sylvain Philippe, who hasn't been feeling too well this weekend. Good to see that he is in there, keeping an eye on everything, but I know he's been feeling a little bit poorly this weekend. Let's hope things go well from the team point of view. Of course, it is going well for Envision. They are leading the team's championship and the drivers' championship with Nick Cassidy at the moment.
Yeah, they're having a very strong run. I mean, you know, at the start of the year, all the indications seem to be that the Porsche powertrains were going to be the ones to beat. You know, as the seasons unfolded, the Jaguar powertrain teams, both Envision and the Works team, have sort of come to the fore, I think, and Cassidy in particular, Ben. I mean, 5 podiums in the last 6 races, and it's an incredible run of form.
Yeah, he's doing a good job, isn't he? René Rast just about to complete a lap. Max Günther is fastest at the moment, on a 1:09.309. Verne just a 1/10 of a second slower than him. Rast currently 12th. Let's just see what Roberto Meri's been up to here. Going down into turn 1, big lock up. Right front, managed to keep it all together.
Yeah. Just completely locked up the front right, as you said. But I think it's one of the biggest challenges, to be honest, in Formula E, because you're constantly trying to get the brake balance right in terms of the energy recovery system for the motor and the mechanical brakes, as we see there, the brake discs themselves, bang on cue as the wheel comes off. You know, those are your traditional brake discs that you see on, you know, race cars for many, many years, and on most road cars, obviously, at the moment. But you've also got the energy recovery happening from the motor, which spins the other way under braking, and getting that balance right is such a challenge in Formula E. Yeah. And I can see why a rookie like Meri is struggling with that.
I think that's one of the biggest issues, you're right. Learning how to, when you press the brake pedal, it may just, you may not be getting any disc brake up front. It may just be the regeneration from the power unit. These Gen 3 cars have a power unit in the front and another at the back. The one at the front is the one that regenerates power from the braking. You've got drive shafts on those front wheels now. It's also increased the steering weight, I gather, too. So the driver's working quite hard on the steering.
Yeah, it is a bit heavier, certainly, because you got torque coming through the front axle. So I had a chance to go in one of the Gen 3 cars back in Hyderabad a few months ago, and that was you could definitely make out how much heavier it is.
So Roberto Meri comes over the line, and he's still struggling a little bit, 1:10.8. But of course, at least he's getting some lap times in, whereas Eder Mortara, who had that little contact with the wall, he's still in the pits at the moment, and I wonder whether he's going to be back out at all in this event. Nico Müller, we're looking at now in the Abt Cupra. That's a team that has struggled, except for, of course, their wonderful qualifying in the wet in Berlin, where they ended up on the front row together, which was remarkable. And actually, Nico did a good job in that race, even though it was a dry race. He was able to come home in 9th place. That's been his best finish of the year, but I think that's his only points, in fact, of the year. So it has been a tough time for the Abt Cupra team. Meanwhile, Jake Dennis here on a decent lap by the looks of things. He is certainly one of the main contenders that we're going to be watching this weekend.
Yeah, Sebastian Buemi on a strong lap as well. He's, we've seen him already on pole position twice this year, I think, and he's certainly been on much better form than he has been last season, where he really didn't enjoy his time in Formula E, but he's come back strong this year. Jake Dennis, as you say, Ben, 5th at the moment, but he's on a better lap. There's faster improvement times coming up and down the field. Buemi goes 2nd at the moment. We see Sam Bird on a good lap as well, but here comes Jake Dennis out of the final corner, up towards the line, and goes to the top of the times.
1:08.9, so we're back down to the sort of times we saw in FP1 now. 1:08.946 was Max Günther yesterday, and now we're seeing very similar sort of times, 1:08.936. So Sam Bird with the Jaguar both Jaguars obviously very, very competitive. Mitch Evans second, or he's just been pushed down to third. Mitch Evans in the other Jaguar. He's been pushed down by Max Günther. Let's just see what Sam does. So Sam Bird goes 5th fastest for the moment. So both Jaguars are well up in the order, not right at the very top. Jake Dennis has that margin by just a tiny amount. There's James Barkley, boss of the Jaguar TCS racing team. And with Jaguar powering these two machines and the two Envisions, they're in a good form. Will we see Jaguar powertrains win the championship for the first time? It's certainly something that's looking very, very possible, but the battle with Porsche is continuing.
Yeah, Antonio Felix da Costa, he's just not yet fully settled in, has he? You know, he obviously was very comfortable in the Techeetah team that he was with before, won the championship with them, joined the Works Porsche team, and he's always, apart from that amazing win in Cape Town right at the end, he's always seemed just sort of a step behind Pascal Wehrlein when it comes to pace, and you know, he's not fully out of touch when it comes to the championship, but he'll need a stellar run of races towards the end of the season to secure that.
Watching Lucas Di Grassi at the moment, and part of the Mahindra team, it has been a struggle, there's no doubt. He had that excellent third place in Mexico to start the season off, but that was a bit of an outliner, really. It's only been the 1-point score that he's had so far this year. Only twice has he got into the duels challenge of qualifying. And for Frédéric Bertrand, who has become the team boss of Mahindra this year, there is plenty to do. He's actually been over to India to speak to the Mahindra bosses and say, look, you know, this is what we need to do, this is how we can step forward. They're putting a lot of work in at the moment. They know they're just not that competitive at this stage, especially in race trim, but we'll have to see how it gets on. Meanwhile, some drivers now just trying to find a little bit of space. We might see some drivers now beginning to put together some sort of full attack laps coming up. We'll have to wait and see. At the moment, it is still Jake Dennis who is fastest, Max Günther second, and then Mitch Evans currently third fastest. Sergio Sette Camera, let's see how he's getting on with the Neo 333. Across the line, he's 10th fastest at this stage. Put in a decent lap, 109.2, and the lap times are certainly very, very close. We won't get the full idea, though, until we get into qualifying, will we?
Yeah, the track's cleaning up all the time. This is Sam Bird down into the first corner. He won't be very happy. Yeah, he won't be particularly happy with that Andretti being bang on the line. This was Di Grassi. And what did he get up to here? So, oh, Sam seemed to do the same to him. Yeah, further down. But there's not much room for Sam to get out of the way there, really. So I think that was okay. This is René Rast in the pits, so it might be coming in just do some tire pressure changes, Ben, because as the drivers are doing more and more laps, you know, and the track temperature is getting hotter and hotter. As you said, 33 degrees outside, but as the sun's beating down, that track temperature is going to be well up into the high 40s, maybe even low 50s when we get to the race.
Very true. And tire pressures, of course, there are quite strict rules on those as well, as we saw this team getting shot to the back down at Monaco because their tyre pressures weren't completely correct. So Verne and Van Dorn had to start from the very back of the grid in Monaco, didn't they? So you've got to get all this stuff planned and sorted in your pre-practice sessions.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that was a lost opportunity for that team. They managed to get both cars from the back of the grid into the points, which just tells how much potential they actually had if they'd been able to start, you know, further up. So, yeah, getting the car completely right from a legality standpoint is you know, it's just default, isn't it? You've got no argument there. Da Costa, though, he is on a very, very strong lap there, bang on the pace, 2/10 up in the first sector straight away as he comes through this middle part of the lap, as I was saying, through 9, 10 and 11, the right-hander here, and the car, you can see just moving around, dancing around. There's definitely less dust now than there was earlier on this session when we got going about 20 minutes ago. So the lap time's coming thick and fast.
Portuguese driver Antonio Felix da Costa, a real star in former champion in Formula E, but the last few races have not really quite gone to plan. He was only 15th in Monaco, 5th in the second of the Berlin races. His victory, the one victory he's had this year, that came in Cape Town. It was a fantastic victory too, some good passing moves, but he needs to sort of get it back together. But he has gone fastest, a 108.8, so that's the fastest we've seen. Jean-Eric Werner has some sort of problem, some sort of issue with the car, and you can see from the body language that things are not quite right.
It seems like something in the cockpit with the steering, the mechanics look in the steering wheel. He's got out of the car. There's a lot of looking in the cockpit rather than the suspension or the steering system itself. So I wonder if he's got an actual issue, you know, somewhere where the steering column mounts or the steering wheel itself.
David Beckman once more. He's now the youngest driver in the championship, taking over from Sacha Fenestres, who has been the youngest up to now, but now we've got a new rookie in David Beckman at 23 years old. He's the 80th driver to race in Formula E. Well, we've got 80th and 81st now, because we've got two new drivers this weekend coming into the event, but he is the youngest on the grid. He's raced in Formula 4, in GP3, taking victories in 2018. The FIA Formula 3 Championship. He's done a couple of years of Formula 2 with some podiums. And then earlier this year, actually, David Beckman, a very different style of driving. He won the LMP2 class at Sebring. So now he's getting very used to the Formula E. Let's go on board with Dan Ticktum. Corinne, just talk us around the lap and how it feels from the driver point of view.
Yep, as he comes through turns 2 and 3 here, and the track just starting to open up now. There's a pretty tight section there through 2 and 3, and then you start to unleash a bit of power. It's quite bumpy here. Watch his hands of the car bouncing around. You can hear it as well underneath in that braking zone 4-7. Big slide, classic Dan Ticktum there. He's not afraid of having the car sideways at all sorts of angles and relies on his car control to sort it out. But yeah, he's got plenty of ability and confidence, that's for sure. Turn 13, slightly wide of the apex there, the hairpin. That's not so much of a problem. He carry a bit more momentum. I think he might have just backed off here, Ben, because he's looking in his mirrors to make a gap. There was a car ahead of him, and I think he was a bit concerned about getting boxed up there. So, yep, he has abandoned and is coming into the pit. So we won't get to see a full lap on this occasion, but we saw plenty of drifting there from Dan Ticktum.
As you said, it's fun watching Dan Ticktum because he has that style of driving and he goes on attack mode nearly all the time. Sometimes it doesn't quite work, sometimes it's over attack mode a bit too much. Let's just see what Sam Bird does. Yes, he goes fastest. Good lap, fastest in all, second and third sectors. And he has taken the fastest lap time, a 108.478. That's the fastest we've seen all weekend so far, and actually it's faster than last year's pole position as well. So we're getting a bit more representation now, I think, of the sort of lap times. The track is cleaning up, although we have still seen a bit of dust around. So as we go into qualifying later, I'm sure the lap times will further improve. First stage of qualifying, they'll run to the 300 kilowatt mark and then into the joules, of course. They get more power to play with as well, don't they?
Yeah, exactly that. So here's Sam Bird's teammate, Mitch Evans. He's a bit down, actually, quarter of a second down on Sam's time. So winner of the race here in Jakarta, of course, last year, and very much a title contender. Max Günther, very quick yesterday, fastest of anybody in yesterday's practice session, and he's slightly ahead of Sam Bird's time in the first two sectors. Evans comes up towards the line, and he will end up in 5th. But watch Günther, because he's coming up now and does go ahead of Sam Bird. Very strong last sector for Max Günther, nearly a 10th and a half now ahead of Sam Bird.
It's impressive, as you say, and it backs up what he did yesterday. So Max Günther's on good form here at the moment. Stoffel Van Dorn is into the pits. It's teammate Jean-Eric Werner, who we know has some sort of a problem with the car, but Stoffel Van Dorn looks as though he's going to be maybe sent back out on track. Let's wait and see whether that's going to happen. Meanwhile, Sebastian Buemi in the other Envision. Buemi currently down in 9th place. Not on a particularly quick lap at the moment.
Loads of understeer in that car. He's really chasing the front end. You could see having to wait and wait to pick the power up. So, yeah, I think he'll be not particularly happy with the balance of that car. And with 5 minutes to go in this session, or less than 5 minutes to go, this is the point where you've really got to be thinking about what do you do for qualifying. You know, are you happy with the car as it is, or do you need to make changes in the next couple of hours before we go to qualifying?
Yeah, and you're into a sequence now where it all ramps up pretty quickly, doesn't it? There's not a huge amount of time to turn things around. You've got to start thinking ahead, as you say, towards qualifying. There's Jake Dennis. So he was fastest earlier on in this session. He's now down in 3rd place, but he's still very much in the mix up there near the top. Gunter from Sandberg, from Jake Dennis, and then Antonio Felix da Costa is in 4th place. Sasha Fenestres is in 5th place. Mitch Evans now being pushed down to 6th. Stoffel Van Dorn, who we saw in the pits a moment ago, currently in 7th place. Norman Nato 8th. Sebastian Buemi 9th. And top 10, Lucas Di Grassi. Actually, that's quite interesting. He's still up there.
Sector 2 and Sector 3, so he should be clear by the...
Jaguars, meanwhile, being pushed back into the pits. Are they going to be doing much more? Tyre change, perhaps. They will be presumably doing some more practice starts again at the end of this practice session.
Yeah, and that's important to do as well, you know, because the track, the grip level and the amount of dust on the track would have changed between yesterday and today, so they have got to do that practice start. But I'll tell you what, though, Pascal Wehrlein will be a bit worried, won't he? You know, down in 18th, it's an okay first sector. It is an improvement, but you know, that's not what you want to see on the lap times as you're heading to qualifying. He's a bit of an outlier, actually, as well as McLaren so far. You know, they 15th and 19th for Aston Hughes. It's not where we'd expect to see them.
No, I think that's a really good point about Pascal Wehrlein, because he had such a strong start to the season. It does feel to me there's been this little gap since Monaco to this race. Now it all ramps up again over the next few weeks, going into the last few events of Formula E. He's got to get it together in a way here in Jakarta in these 2 races. These are critical races. If he's going to keep the pressure on Cassidy in the championship, they've got to start getting those results back together. And at the moment, Pascal Wehrlein, well, he's 6th, but you know, they really want to be finding a bit more pace, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's on the back foot a bit, isn't he? Because he'd gone from that brilliant start that you mentioned to being pretty comprehensively outscored, especially in the last 6 races by Cassidy, and you know, that he relinquished the championship lead, and he made that error in Cape Town, pretty uncharacteristic error, it has to be said, where he crashed into this guy, Sebastian Buemi, and he it's just the sort of wheels that start to fall off the wagon a little bit, hasn't it? And he's just got to get that back on track. Yeah,
and we've seen him in the past. You know, he usually keeps it all together, but it hasn't quite worked yet. Jake Dennis, and he's doing well, and another driver who's been through a bit of a poor patch, but it feels to me as though he has picked back up. Monaco was a good event for him, so although he had previous to that had a bit of a tough time with a very strong start to the season, the first race winner of this current season in Mexico. But he is putting together a good season, and let's keep a close eye on him. He's currently 3rd fastest at the moment, and he's doing a personal best, so this could see him go, yep, it goes 2nd fastest now to Max Gunter, the gap 0.117.
Yeah, Jake's been a bit unlucky as well, hasn't he? He got taken out in a couple of races, completely not his fault, but they cost a whole heap of points. And, you know, in some ways, he put himself into those positions, I feel. As Edo Mortara did, you know, he firmly put himself in the position of sitting and watching on TV rather than driving around after flouting the barrier.
It's disappointing, they haven't got him back out, so there must be damage to the car that we didn't quite see, because I thought they might get him back out with a different set of wheels on, but nope, there's clearly more work. So Paul Mortara, well, I say Paul, it was his mistake, and he hasn't got any laps in FP2, which is a bit of a hurt.
I mean, they're bookending the field at the moment, aren't they? With Gunter at the top of the times, and Mortara with no laps on the board. So at least the team will have some good data and be able to show Edo Mortara just what the potential of that car is.
Pascal Wehrlein's on a decent lap at the moment. We are going to see the checker flag coming up in just around 10 seconds. Be interesting to see whether Wehrlein gets in a better lap. He's done 2 reasonably good first sectors. Max Gunter still in good shape at the moment. Looks as though he's going to end up with this fastest time. But in the background, yeah, Wehrlein is fourth fastest, a 108.6. So, yeah, that is more encouraging for Pascal Wehrlein. But whether that will convert into the sort of times we'll see in qualifying, there is the Tag Heuer Porsche team. And they know this is an important event. That both races this weekend, they've got to start scoring well again. Back with René Rast, who we saw in the pits earlier on with the McLaren, and currently trying to find just a little bit more pace. He's down in 18th position at this stage. Jake Hughes isn't very far up either. It looks as though whether they're playing a different game at the moment, not going for the single lap pace, I don't know, but yeah, they're not showing great pace. He's done a decent first sector. Let's just see if this moves him up a little bit. 15th.
Yeah, it's still not going to be somewhere they're happy about, is it? You know, nearly 8/10 off the pace. You know, that's not great. But you know, you have to say both Boemi and Cassidy as well, 12th and 13th, outside the top 10.
Yeah, that's surprising, isn't it?
That's surprising. Got a yellow flag.
Unless Envision have got this sort of in mind, you know, we're going to keep our best for later. I don't know. Yes, yellow flag. Just to finish things off, let's have a look at what Nick Cassidy's been up to. Whoa. We don't see many mistakes from Nick Cassidy normally, but back end getting loose.
Yeah, and didn't quite, you know, we sort of caught the end of it there. It's quite hard to see if he was wide of the racing line and got in the dust at that point, but no major harm. Here he is. We'll see. Oh, he's completely struggling for rear end grip. Way
That's turn
before
one,
the
isn't
apex.
it?
Yeah, into turn one. Way before the apex, the rear of the car was starting to come around on him, and as soon as he made a bit more of an attempt to make the corner, it just came around completely.
So team boss Sylvain Philippe will have looked at that. But to go off there is not a bad place. That turn one has a decent runoff area. If you're going to experiment, if you're going to try something you're not sure is going to work, that probably is the place to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Into the...
Okay, so main corner to focus, turn 7. Yeah, 10 to front lock all the way.
Bit of information from Max Günther, who's set the pace here in both practice sessions, so that's pretty good. He's taken fastest time in both free practice 1 and now free practice 2, whereas his teammate Edo Mortara is having work done. So it looks as though there's possibly front suspension damage as a result of the contact that he made with the wall. Certainly taking things apart there. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we had a look at the rear earlier, didn't we? That broken rim, but we didn't get a chance to have a proper look at the front, and clearly the team have found something that is not right. So yeah, that's not good for them.
Practice starts taking place now as well, and that will be crucial later on today when we get into round 10 of the Formula E Championship, lighting up those rears and getting off the line well and into turn 1. Whereas we can see from that little incident from Nick Cassidy a moment ago, there is plenty of space.
Yeah, maybe we don't do the last practice attack if it's too dirty offline.
Yes, we don't do.
Dirty offline, I think, is an interesting point there, because you can still see the dust, even on the grid, as they're doing these practice starts. Offline, it's dusty. You don't want to be on the inside line particularly. You want to be on the outside line at the start of the race, don't you?
Yeah, but I find that radio message slightly confusing, because he's saying he doesn't want to do the attack mode practice on this in-lap if it's dusty offline, but it's not going to clear up if nobody goes there. So it probably is worth practicing what it's like when you go on that dusty part of the track.
Yeah, good point. On board with Sam Bird. Let's just see what the practice start is like for Sam. Very experienced Formula E racer, of course.
There we go. You see the launch mode on the steering wheel activated there. And that's pretty good drive.
It is massive acceleration from these, isn't it?
Yeah, four-wheel drive, of course, these days. So even on a dusty surface, you've got power being put to the ground through both axles, which is very helpful off the line.
So there we go. Practice starts being done, but FP2 is done and dusted. Quite dusty in many ways. But it's Max Günther who has set the pace. and I think he will be very happy with the way it has gone here today. So Max Günther fastest by 0.117 a second over Jake Dennis and Sam Bird. And we've got a real mix of teams up in there: Maserati, Avalanche Andretti, Jaguar and Tag Heuer Porsche, with Pascal Wehrlein ahead of Stoffel van Dorn and then Mitch Evans. Antonio Felix da Costa in 7th ahead of Sascha Fenestrez. Nico Müller, that's a good effort by him, and Dan Ticktum, who was 10th fastest. Outside the top 10, we have Norman Nato, who was 11th fastest, ahead of Sebastian Buemi and Nick Cassidy. So that was a little bit interesting that both Envision cars are outside the top 10. That wasn't quite what we were expecting. Jean-Eric Vergne had some sort of little bit issue. David Beckman making his debut this weekend, 17th fastest, and the other driver making his debut, Roberto Meri, ended up 21st, but poor Eder Mortara didn't get a lap in at all after making contact with the wall. So let's just have a look back at some of the action, some slow motion action of the cars as they're being tuned in to this Jakarta circuit here. It is a good track, there's no doubt. There is space, there's areas that they can attack pretty hard and still have a bit of space to play with, but as we saw earlier on, you can make mistakes and make contact with the wall as well. So drivers now have got to sort of wrap up everything fairly quickly, think about what changes they might want, talk to the engineers, and then get ready for qualifying.
Yeah, and find some aircon as Sebastian Buemi has done. Fine, just cooled down in this.
You want to get up close? Sorry, I asked if you can not film me when I have my balaclava. It's not my sponsor one.
So Nick Cassidy, the man who's leading the championship, yeah, it's feeling a bit warm, I should think, after that run. And it's going to get hotter and hotter as we go through into the next stage for qualifying, and then of course for the race itself. Sam Bird, 3rd fastest in this free practice. I think that's pretty encouraging, and he's looking in good form at the moment, thinking ahead. Let's take a little look back at some of the highlights from that free practice session. So Nick Cassidy was one of the early cars out onto the track, but as we were seeing straight away, there are some dusty sections offline, and on the opening flying lap, this was the mistake that Eder Mortara made, contact with the wall.
Yeah, up into turn 16 is completely got crossed up under braking and had what seemed like a glancing blow, but clearly done enough damage to that car. So he missed the rest of the session. Buemi did a good job to set the early marker as René Rast got boxed in a little bit behind one of the Neo cars.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out for him. We've got the 2 young drivers making debuts as well. Jake Dennis, though, doing a great job in the McLaren. Jean-Eric Vergne was putting together some good laps early on in that session and was quite near the top of the list, but then he was a little concerned about an issue with the car bringing it in later on. Sam Bird putting in a decent lap towards the end of the session. That put him 3rd, faster than his teammate Mitch Evans. A nice onboard view there with the Maserati as well. Then this spin towards the end from Nick Cassidy, the championship leader. Thankfully, no damage done. Just got away from him, didn't it?
Yeah, I think he changed one of the power modes on the steering wheel I saw, and that maybe just caught him off guard into that corner, but it was Max Günther who had no such issues, Ben, to go to the top of the times. Yeah, 2 fastest sessions for Max Günther this weekend, so well done to him. And everyone else now just thinking about what they can do to try and make these cars work when they get into qualifying a little bit later on. Lucas Di Grassi was 14th fastest. Sam, as we mentioned, was 3rd fastest. Pascal Wehrlein in the Porsche was 4th fastest. And as we mentioned earlier, he's really got to try and put together a decent weekend to compete against Jaguar. There's Roberto Meri, who is enjoying his first time in Formula E. Interesting career he's had. He raced in Formula Renault 3.5 many years ago, up against the likes of Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, and funnily enough, Oliver Rowland, who finished 4th behind him. He finished 3rd that year, although he was in the battle for the championship. And quite interesting that he's now got this opportunity, having replaced Oliver Rowland in that car for this weekend. Whether it stays like that for the rest of the year, we don't really quite know yet. So Max Günther has taken the fastest times in both practice sessions here in Jakarta, but qualifying will be coming up pretty soon.